What is up guys, Deadset here. In this video we will make a full exploration of some of my favorite builds in patch 2.6.1 for Season 12. Let's go. We'll start things off with the Barbarian. Empowered by the Immortal King set, this build emphasizes melee devastation and pulverizes his enemies to the ground with Hammer of the Ancients, while maintaining a vast array of buffs and warriors at his side. This is an agile, face-to-face burst damage build that is a prime choice for Barbarians in Season 12. For your rotation, activate Call of the Ancients and Wrath of the Berserker as soon as you start a run, and keep both skills up throughout the Rift, a task made infinitely easier with the Immortal King set bonus. Remember that Wrath of the Berserker needs to be cast on cooldown, but only resummon Call of the Ancients when one or more of them die off. Once you find an area suitably dense with enemies, begin your Hammer of the Ancients assault, only stopping to refresh your Band of Might bonus with a Furious Charge. Furious Charge will also be used for mobility, finding new fights or dodging dangerous situations in this otherwise static and methodical playstyle. On the buff side, keep Battle Rage up at all times and let out a Warcry as often as you can. Your primary damage dealer is the namesake of the build, Hammer of the Ancients. Considered as a beginner build staple for a long time, it becomes an endgame viable spender through the bracers of the First Men, skyrocketing its damage and increasing its attack speed by 50%. The rune of choice is Smash, as its higher base damage trumps the utility bonuses of all the other options. While it's certainly not the focus of the build both spec and gear-wise, Furious Charge brings great utility to the deliberate pace of the build. Akin to a Swiss knife, it brings mobility, Fury Generation, and a proc for Band of Might. The rune of choice is Merciless Assault. The dissonance of elemental damage with the rest of the build is not a concern, as the self-sufficient cooldown reset is what you're truly after. Hitting 5 or more enemies will instantly reset Furious Charge. The Immortal King set bonuses allows for the permanent uptime of two hallmark, long cooldown Barbarian skills, Call of the Ancients and Wrath of the Berserker. The two-piece bonus removes the duration of Call of the Ancients, allowing you to benefit from the trio of warriors until they're killed. Sturdy as they are, powerful affixes and bad fights can result in one or more of them falling in battle, so keep an eye out on the counter and resummon immediately. The 4-piece IK bonus assists you with the cooldown reset for a reason. The Chosen rune together as one is the foundation of your toughness, while the Ancient's Fury rune, which is acquired from the worn Fury of the Ancient's shoulder, is the basis of your Fury management. No superlatives should be spared when talking about Wrath of the Berserker, especially when paired with the damage amplifier of the Insanity rune. For the sake of brevity, this is the single most powerful self-buff of Barbarians, providing you with significant amounts of dodge, crit chance, attack and movement speed. Easily reaching permanency through the Immortal King 4-piece bonus, this skill is a fixture to the build. On the topic of buffs, two additional skills round out the category: the offensive Battle Rage and the defensive Warcry. Battle Rage is a staple of the class, bumping up both damage and crit chance. While its 2-minute duration can catch you off guard, never allow Battle Rage to drop. It's a solid source of damage, especially with the AoE-oriented Bloodshed rune. As the build is limited in sources of healing, you can consider spamming Battle Rage out of combat to heal up through life per fury spent on gear. Warcry is a 2-in-1 utility skill that brings extra toughness with the Veteran's Warning rune. Once activated, the buff lasts for 3 times the cooldown of the skill, but situations may arise when you need it for the Fury generation, so Warcry is not as passive as it first seems. This concludes the overview of the active skills. Now let us look through the passives. Able to burst and hop between targets better than many Barbarian builds, the HotA Barb is a natural adopter of the Rampage passive. Learning to maximize this passive is important, as it's a true multiplier with the potential to net you 25% additional strength, increasing DPS and toughness substantially. Staying at or near the cap can only be achieved if you stay vigilant and on the move, aiming to get into bigger fights where killing minor enemies will feed your stacks. While the build is resource intensive, you quickly regain what was lost. Your weapon will refund Fury, your Ancients will give Fury per hit, and both Warcry and Furious Charge are generators. This results in a fairly stable resource pool, allowing you to take full advantage of the additive damage increase of Berserker Rage. Hardly lacking single target damage, the HotA Barb still incorporates Ruthless, a testament to the quality of the passive. Once you hammer your targets below 30% health, your damage spikes with a 40% multiplier, allowing you to tear down your target even quicker. Your final passive slot is flexible, with a number of viable and useful options. As the build is prone to getting spiked in damage, is not as fluid as the Whirlwind Barb, and suffers for sources of healing, Relentless can be a nice fit, allowing you to stand your ground and regain health. A second life is never a bad option, making Nerves of Steel an attractive pickup. If you feel the need for additional damage, you can also take Brawler and gamble on densely packed rifts. Let's talk about gear. This build takes advantage of the Immortal King 6-piece bonus. Incorporating 6 of the 7 available pieces from the set, the Immortal King weapon is replaced by the Istvan Spared Blade set, Slanderer and Little Rogue. Rolls-wise, this is a Hammer of the Ancients centric build, and takes good advantage of HotA skill bonuses on the Immortal King Helm and Immortal King Boots. Pure toughness rolls are preferred on the Immortal King Chest and Immortal King Pants. Survivability stats are also taken on the Immortal King Belt, along with Life per Fury spent as the 4th primary. Finally, the usual double crit stats are taken on the Immortal King Gloves, alongside strength and area damage. Taking enough pieces to obtain the 6-piece bonus of Immortal King naturally opens a powerful offensive combo in the jewelry, the Endless Walk set, Compass Rose, and Traveler's Pledge. This 2.4 rework adds a unique mechanic that slowly increases your damage by up to 100% if you remain stationary, and drains it away and increases your damage reduction while moving. This dynamic mimics the HotA Barb playstyle, as you alternate between furious charge bursts of movement in search of the next big fight, with extended periods of stationary Hammer of the Ancients spam. Seek double crit stats, area damage, and an open socket for the Compass Rose, and double crit stats, fire elemental damage, and an open socket on the Traveler's Pledge. Your other ring slot will be taken by the pure damage boost of Convention of Elements, whose rotation of elemental bonuses you'll need to learn and time to maximize the benefits of the short-lived fire proc. Its ideal stats are crit chance, crit damage, an open socket, and either area damage or a flat damage increase. Your shoulder slot will be taken by the Fury of the Ancients, a legendary item tailored specifically for Immortal King based builds, which provides the Ancients Fury rune for free. This item is a cornerstone in your Fury management and toughness, since it allows you to slot the protective together as one rune. Bracers of the First Men are a crucial piece for the playstyle, almost single-handedly turning Hammer of the Ancients into an endgame spender. That bracer increases the HotA attack speed by 50% and damage by 500%. The preferred stats are Strength, Vitality, Crit Chance, and Fire Elemental damage, along with as high of a HotA damage roll as you can find. As for weapons, I recommend that you dual wield the Istvan Spared Blade set, Little Rogue and Slanderer, as they offer a significant toughness and attack speed increase that matches the Life per Fury spent restorative mechanic of the build. Their use is further reinforced by the ability to extract the Gavel of Judgment's HotA damage bonus into the cube as of patch 2.6.1. Let's talk about legendary gems. There are two major approaches to one of the staples in the setup. The more straightforward and reliable option is the defensive bulwark of Esoteric Alteration, keeping this face-tanking build much safer. The Glacier competitor for the slot is Pain Enhancer. It benefits from the crit bonuses of Battle Rage, Wrath of the Berserker, and Hammer of the Ancients itself, giving additional attack speed and AoE damage in return. It really shines in big trash pulls, working with Bracers of the First Men to double up the rate of your HotA output. Bane of the Trapped is a potent source of additional damage, as it is its own multiplier in your total damage calculation. The gem procs itself with its level 25 property when in melee range, synergizing with the close and personal range of Hammer of the Ancients. Bane of the Stricken occupies the third and final jewelry socket during GR progression, building up your damage multiplicatively in prolonged fights, and with a level 25 bonus specifically targeting Rift Guardians. This gem is designed to assist AoE heavy builds in the struggle against single target high health enemies. HotA Barbs are better suited to single target fights than many other AoE specs, but they still take decent advantage of the gem, a fine testament to its quality. In Kanai's Cube, storing the Gavel of Judgment is a natural choice for a HotA-centric build, since this two-handed mighty weapon is the basis of your Fury management with its refund mechanic, and also offers a massive skill damage bonus. You have two options for the armor slot of the cube. The default recommendation, Mage Fist, focuses on damage output with its fire damage increase, matching your primary damage dealer's smash. The defensive alteration would be to cube Aquila Cuirass, which will halve incoming damage as long as you maintain above 90% of your resource reserve. Significantly buffed in patch 2.6.1, Band of Might offers supreme mitigation for the build, 80% damage reduction, towering over other defensive staples like Unity and its 50% damage reduction. It's also independent of the presence of a follower and has a modest requirement of casting Furious Charge at least once every 8 seconds. Finally, for the Paragon points, max out movement speed up to the 25% cap, then go for maximum fury followed by strength in the core section, only going for vitality if you feel the need to. In offense, max out critical hit chance and critical hit damage first, followed by attack speed and finally cooldown reduction. In defense, max out all resistance, followed by life percentage and armor, and finally add some life regeneration. And in utility, go for area damage and resource cost reduction first, finalizing it with life per hit and gold find. That concludes our dive into the Barbarian HotA build. Let's move on to Crusader. One of the original builds of Crusaders makes a return in patch 2.6.1, elevated by numeric buffs and a slew of synergistic items added over the last few years. The Holy Shotgun Crusader embodies the tanky, impenetrable bulwark of steel that absorbs blows and retaliates in blasts of pure, radiant vengeance. For your rotation, activate Akarat's Champion as soon as you enter a run and reapply it on cooldown, ideally overlapping with the previous one to maintain the valuable toughness and damage buffs. Because a large part of your damage comes in retaliation of blocked attacks, this build puts a heavy emphasis on positioning. For example, facing weaker hordes of monsters behind your back to keep a streak of blocks going, while facing towards high-value targets like elites to keep the ivory tower blasts going quick. To maintain a high block chance, you'll be focusing on it on gear and assist it further by spamming Punish in fights. Aside from the fires of Heaven shot by Ivory Tower, you should also use your own Heaven's Fury on cooldown. To buff those two damaging skills, you need to keep up the bonuses of Bracers of Fury by covering enemies in immobilizing judgments. Last but not least, debuff enemies with Laws of Justice decaying strength and keep yourself safe and mobile with Iron Skin Flash. The main damage dealer in the build is Heaven's Fury, a signature Crusader skill that sends a furious beam of holy fire that purges your enemies. You gain the namesake Holy Shotgun effect from the Ivory Tower, granting a Fires of Heaven effect to your blocks, and will use a separate rune of your own, the autonomous damage over time beams of Blessed Ground. While dealing a lot of damage on their own, your two Heaven's Fury shot variations depend a great deal on the damage amplification of Bracers of Fury. This legendary item necessitates the use of a crowd control skill in the build, and you'll be hard-pressed to find a wider AoE and better defensive option than Judgment with the Debilitate rune. In order to maintain the high block chance necessary to output good damage from the Ivory Tower and protection from the Justice Lantern, you'll be spamming Punish liberally in fights. You should add a health sustain angle to the skill with the rune Rebirth, since this is a problematic aspect of this face tanking build. Your stalwart source of protection is found in the signature Crusader steroid, Akarat's Champion. Once you reach the comfortable 56% CDR threshold, you can maintain Akarat's Champion form indefinitely. While it increases your damage multiplicatively by 35% and supplies you with 5 wrath per second as a base effect, the skill also takes on a defensive role through the tanky Prophet rune. Supplying you with 150% additional armor and a free life, this skill can juggle nicely with Indestructible to keep you safe and alive in high-grader rifts. Iron Skin is a staple damage reduction tool, cutting incoming damage in half and removing enemy collision through the Flash rune. Despite the heavy focus on cooldown reduction in the build, you'll only have Iron Skin up about a third of the time, so make sure to pop it in situations where you anticipate burst or need for mobility. Laws of Justice is one of the strongest tanking tools at Crusader's disposal and fits tightly into a build that produces damage by taking it first. With the potent percentage-based scaling of the Decaying Strength rune, your enemies' attacks can be cut down by more than half in quick succession. This concludes the overview of the active skills. Now let us look through the passives. Heavenly Strength is a signature Crusader passive, allowing you to wield two-handed weapons in one hand and have a shield in the other. This Fate of the Veil wielding Heaven's Fury build is no exception. Finery is another Crusader staple, adding 1.5% strength for every socket across your gear, including weapon and jewelry. Assuming an average of 10 sockets across a well-equipped character, Finery amounts to a decent boost of both damage and toughness. To maximize the benefits of your Justice Lantern ring and saturate the procs from your Ivory Tower shield, you'll be taking the massive 30% block chance increase from Hold Your Ground when pushing Greater Rifts. Considering the block-based nature of the build and its general lack of health sustain abilities and gear rolls, you'll do well to include Renewal as your final passive. Let's talk about gear. Like any account-based build, you'll be striving to reach a 56% CDR breakpoint in order to achieve permanence of the Akarat's Champion buff. Note that in this build, you'll be using Gogok of Swiftness as one of your legendary gems, allowing you to lose cooldown reduction rolls from 2 major slots, ideally weapon and belt, in favor of other offense stats. You'll be equipping all 6 core Akan armor pieces, losing the Amulet of Akan in favor of the Endless Walk set, as discussed a little later. Cooldown reduction takes priority on the slots where you can get it, certainly on the gloves where it accompanies the crit stats, as well as on the shoulders. The shoulders and chest will also host Heaven's Fury skill damage rolls, augmenting your main damage dealer. The helm, pants, and boots should be largely dedicated to high toughness stats. Taking enough pieces to obtain the 6-piece bonus of the Akan set naturally opens a powerful offensive combo in the jewelry. One of the 2.4 reworks, the Endless Walk set, Compass Rose and Traveler's Pledge, adds a unique mechanic that slowly increases your damage by up to 100% if you remain stationary and drains it away and increases your damage reduction while moving. This dynamic fits the playstyle, which alternates flash-powered bursts of scouting with stationary punish and Heaven's Fury spam. The remaining ring slot will be taken by Justice Lantern, whose unique stat block chance is now enhanced by a legendary property that reduces incoming damage by up to 55% of your block chance. The independence of the damage reduction mechanic from followers and the tie-in with the set bonuses and Ivory Tower make it superior to Unity. The best in-slot belt for the build when pushing Greater Rifts is the Glass Cannon favorite Witching Hour. What this belt lacks in unique properties, it makes up in unique rolls. It's the only item in the slot that can roll attack speed and critical hit damage. Both stats are immensely beneficial to your damage output, so seek as close to the maximum 7 increased attack speed and 50 crit damage as you can. The remaining item slots, bracers, weapon and offhand, will be occupied by the dedicated Heaven's Fury legendary items that increase the skill's damage and modify its properties in a beneficial way. In your wrist slot, Bracers of Fury will augment your main damage dealer against targets affected by a hard crowd control effect. Fate of the Veil will not only provide a general boost to the skill, but will also add 2 extra rays, producing the signature shotgun effect. Finally, you have 2 crucial shields in the build, Ivory Tower and Shield of Fury, the better of which will be worn and the worse cubed. Shield of Fury is ideally worn, since it's a dedicated Crusader shield and can roll vital cooldown reduction and skill damage rolls, unlike Ivory Tower, which is classified as a standard shield despite its Crusader-specific affix. However, Shield of Fury with the ideal stats and a maximized unique property, which would be 30% damage increase to Heaven's Fury per hit, is a very hard thing to attain, and it's more than likely that you should wear an Ivory Tower because of its fixed legendary power for a long time. In your legendary gems, Bane of the Trapped is practically a fixture because of its nature of a separate damage multiplier. Gogok of Swiftness synergizes well with the build in Greater Rift pushes because it indirectly provides you with more cooldown resets and improved healing through your faster attacks. Its 2.4.1 addition of scaling dodge chance is just survivability icing on the cake. Free from the omnipresence of Bane of the Stricken, due to the Shield of Fury fulfilling the same role but better, the Holy Shotgun Crusader is free to take extra tankiness in the build, with its scaling elemental resistances offering the perfect counterpart to the Crusader's naturally strong armor. Esoteric Alteration is easily your strongest mitigation option. The gem is also very welcome in a build whose approach to combat is taking as many hits to the face as possible. In Kanai's Cube, as we previously mentioned, you'll be storing your worst roll between Shield of Fury and Ivory Tower. Aquila Cuirass cuts incoming damage in half if you maintain above 90% of your resource, which is a permanent bonus in a build without a wrath-spending attack. And Convention of Elements will provide a massive bonus to your main damage skill at regular intervals as it rotates through all elements available to Crusaders and eventually reaches Holy. In your Paragon points, max out movement speed up to the 25% cap in the core section, then invest everything into strength and dip into vitality if you feel the need to. In offense, go for cooldown reduction first, then both crit stats, and finally attack speed. In defense, go for all resistance, then life percentage and armor, maxing out life regeneration last. And in utility, go for area damage and life per hit first, finalizing things with gold find and resource cost reduction. Now that we've explored the Holy Shotgun Crusader, let's move on to Demon Hunter. For Demon Hunters, we'll go over a class staple. I'm heavily partial to the Multishot build, which got a tremendous buff in patch 2.6.1. If the image of a lonesome, brooding archer reaping entire fields of demons with a spray of hungering arrows appeals to you, look no further than this classic build. Rotation-wise, the major dynamic of the build comes from building up hatred through evasive fire focus and dumping it through multishot. The same rhythm upkeeps the bonuses from your jewelry set focus and restraint. Preparation is a source of discipline, but the build spends little of it and primarily adopts the skill for the Unhallowed Essence set benefits from Invigoration. With the assistance of Dawn, Vengeance should be kept up at all times for the formidable damage increase and resource regeneration it provides. On a moderate cooldown, Companion is also taken for the Wolf Companion damage bonuses. Finally, Vault is an inexpensive safety tool which you should use as often as you need. The main damage dealer in the build is Multishot, taken with the highest damage potential rune arsenal, at least when Greater Rifting. The unrivaled performance of the rune over the course of a prolonged fight dictates some of the passive and gear choices, but this conformity does not change the core strengths of Multishot: long range, manageable hatred price, and a signature screen-wide AoE. While the build invests heavily into resource cost reduction, you can easily dump your hatred pool with Yang's Recurve attack speed bonus, so the inclusion of a hatred generator is inevitable. The spec falls back on another Demon Hunter staple, Evasive Fire. This primary fires in a convenient cone shape reminiscent of Multishot and sports one of the strongest generation runes, Focus. Remember that alternating your spender with regular evasive fire shots is critical not only for hatred upkeep, but also the focus and restraint set bonuses. The defensive Demon Hunter resource discipline remains mostly untouched, the result of low-cost utility skills and the two-piece bonus of Unhallowed Essence working together. This is quite fortunate for the build, as the set translates every bit of additional discipline into a source of damage, and you can take full advantage of Preparation Invigoration. The skill extends your discipline pool with an additional 20, and can still serve as an emergency 30 discipline refill. Taking full advantage of the skill and item reworks surrounding Vengeance, the Multishot Demon Hunter incorporates the skill into the build and strives for its permanent uptime through a cubed Dawn. The potent 40% damage buff will also increase hatred regeneration to 10 per second from the Seethe rune. Depending on your cube choices, discussed further, Vengeance can also reduce incoming damage in half from the Dark Heart rune gained for free from a cubed Visage of Gunes. With multiple utilities to pick from, the Multishot Demon Hunter chooses a DPS buff roll for the Companion skill through the Wolf Companion rune, boosting you with a temporary multiplicative damage increase. While the Wolf Companion buff sports a generous 10-second uptime, this build runs a moderate amount of cooldown reduction on gear, so try to pop the Companion active in key moments like elite fights or heavy trash density. The final ingredient is an aggressive movement tool, the Demon Hunter staple Vault. Easy on the discipline consumption, this skill can take you great distances before you feel any toll on your reserve. You'll adjust the rune according to your cube armor slot of choice, Tumble if you run Visage of Gunes, or Trail of Cinders if you opt for Cinder Cult. Either way, Vault enables you to dive in and out of combat, picking the best spot to plant yourself and decimate your enemies from during the appropriate proc of Convention of Elements. This concludes the overview of the active skills. Now let us look through the passives. Reworked in patch 2.4, Thrill of the Hunt is an excellent inclusion to the build that slows all enemies hit by multishot by a whopping 80%. Safety concerns aside, it doubles as an effortless proc for Bane of the Trapped and Cool the Weak, freeing you from Caltrops dropping duty or from hoping on a slow proc from secondary stats on gear. Working in unison with Deadman's Legacy, the Ambush passive will deliver during the first 25% of the enemy health pool, and the Quiver will pick up the carnage from 60% and below. The 40% damage increase is multiplicative in nature, emphasizing its superiority over the other options. Cold a Week is a Demon Hunter mainstay, bringing a multiplicative 20% damage increase against slowed or chilled enemies. The benefits from this passive further encourage you to include the reworked Thrill of the Hunt when Greater Rifting or switching to Multishot Wind Chill during speed farm. Bolstering the power of Arsenal, the Multishot Demon Hunter picks up Ballistics in Greater Rifts, yet another multiplicative increase to your damage, doubling the effectiveness of the rockets splitting from your spender. The chance for free additional rocket is just icing on the cake. Let's talk about gear. The build incorporates the complete Unhallowed Essence set, taking all 6 available pieces and opening up the jewelry for the Bastions of Will set and its damage multiplication bonuses. Roles-wise, this multi-shot-centric playstyle takes good advantage of cooldown reduction, skill and area damage affixes. You'll be trying to reach a 37% CDR breakpoint for permanent uptime of Vengeance, attainable from Paragon points, a flawless Royal Diamond in the helm, and 3 other items with max CDR rolls, distributed as you see fit, for example on the shoulders, the quiver and one of your rings. The best in slot roll for the gloves includes double crit stats, alongside high dexterity and either area damage or attack speed. Discipline in the secondary and hatred regeneration in the primary stats are the notable requirements on the chest. Area damage and CDR rolls will be helpful on the shoulders. The pants can sport evasive fire percentage, but it's recommended that you focus on toughness stats there. The helm and boots can roll multi-shot percentage bonus, and it's mandatory to seek the skill bonus at least on the boots. Not skipping on any of the pieces required to obtain the 6-piece bonus leaves space for a potent combo in the jewelry, the Bastions of Will set, Focus and Restraint. This ring set adds an impressive 2.25 independent damage multiplier as long as you alternate between a primary and spender attacks. Thus, learn to weave frequent evasive fire shots in your multi-shot spam. In the stats, aim for crit chance, crit damage and an open socket. Completing the jewelry, you have a number of options for the amulet slot. Arguably, your best option would be a well-rolled Hellfire amulet with a helpful 5th passive like Steady Aim or Awareness. You have other options like the Star of Askaranth, the S of Johan or the Eye of Etlich, but regardless of your choice, the desired stats are crit chance, crit damage, an open socket, and fire elemental damage. Created as a direct answer to the frailty of Demon Hunters, the Wraps of Clarity reduce damage taken by up to 50% for 5 seconds after using a hatred generator. Along with the Bastions of Will set, this item fortifies the position of evasive fire in the build and serves as a constant reminder to alternate your primary and secondary skill. You have 2 belts competing for the waist slot when Greater Rifting, the safer Hunter's Wrath and the Glass Cannon Witching Hour. Hunter's Wrath is a tool for spender-heavy builds to quickly rebuild hatred reserves, reducing spender downtime. Its ability to roll 4 tanky primary stats makes it a safer choice to the all-out DPS of the Witching Hour, but the latter is unmatched in burst potential, with its unique crit and attack speed rolls, making it preferable for high endgame pushing. Tailor-made for multi-shot builds, the Yang's Recurve Bow features too many helpful affixes to ignore. Naturally rolling with up to 50% resource cost reduction, it's already a strong contender for an expensive spender build. What seals the deal is the unique property of the bow, speeding up multi-shot by 50% and turning the solid attack rate into an unyielding barrage. The other desired stats are high damage range, high dexterity percentage damage, and discipline in the secondary stats. No less important than its weapon counterpart, the Deadman's Legacy is a multi-shot specific quiver that picks damage up almost where ambush leaves off. With an optimal roll, the quiver will apply a second multi-shot hit as soon as your enemy reaches below 60% health, including the rockets from Arsenal. An ideal roll would also include a high multi-shot percentage bonus, all the way up to 200% with the 2.6.1 rework, cooldown reduction, and discipline in the secondary stats. In the legendary gems, Bane of the Trapped is present yet again as a true separate damage multiplier, procced by Zystone of Vengeance, Thrill of the Hunt, and crowd control secondary stats on gear like slow or freeze percentage. Zystone of Vengeance is another independent multiplier whose range-dependent amplification can be easily maxed out by the long reach of Multishot. The level 25 property will add some minor control and safety to the build, as well as another proc for Bane of the Trapped. Bane of the Powerful's duration scales very well with levels, and having a low uptime on a decently leveled gem is a telling sign that the rift is unfavorable anyway, whether it's a winding layout, lacking density, or insufficient elites. The gem's default 20% damage increase has been reworked into multiplicative, and the level 25 bonus now increases and reduces elite damage by 15%, making it a well-rounded choice for many builds. For extremely high endgame pushing though, you should still swap the gem out for Bane of the Stricken to assist you in taking down the Rift Guardian. In Kanai's cube, the previously affixless Dawn turns into one of the most attractive Demon Hunter crossbows to consume, with Vengeance reworked into a universally desired buff, reducing its cooldown up to 65% and achieving permanent uptime through gear is an opportunity you cannot pass lightly. Working alongside Dawn, the Helm Visage of Guns allows you to store a convenient damage reduction bonus from Dark Heart in the cube and work on your resource management through Seethe on the skill bar. The old favorite for the slot, Cinder Cult, remains a strong alternative with its 30% resource cost reduction to fire skills. It will result in a longer multi-shot arsenal resource dump, preferable for pushing GR limits, but does take you to the glass cannon extremities. In Greater Rifts, the jewelry slot will be best taken by the pure damage boost of Convention of Elements, whose rotation of elemental bonuses you have to keep under close scrutiny. Once the sequence reaches the fire element, you will enjoy a significant increase to your damage, so try to adopt a strategy of drawing monster attention during the off cycles and major hatred spending during the fire cycle. In the Paragon Points core section, max out movement speed up to the 25% cap, then put all the other points into dexterity and optionally maxing out hatred according to your personal preference. In the offense section, go for cooldown reduction first, then crit damage, crit chance and attack speed. In defense, all resistance takes precedence, then life percentage, armor and life regeneration. And in utility, go for area damage first, followed by resource cost reduction, life per hit and then gold find. Now that we've given Demon Hunters a shot, let's go over to Monks. One of the classes with the tightest skill synergies, Monks have only recently suffered for a mid-range spec to complement their mastery over martial arts and sheer brawling power. That is no more, with the recent buffs to the Wave of Light build that rains a storm of righteous fire at any range on the battlefield. The build begins runs with an activation of Sweeping Wind, whose stacking mechanic dictates the Sun Wukong damage and protection bonuses. Use Dashing Strike to seek out and draw the attention of massive groups of enemies, then begin the alternating Crippling Wave and Wave of Light assault. When facing with damage spikes, pop your Mantra of Salvation Agility active for additional toughness. To satiate this spirit-hungry setup, you'll use the passive benefit of Inner Storm plus regular Crippling Wave attacks, but once resources drop lower, you should trigger Air Ally for an instant refill. The primary damage dealer of the build is the Spirit-intensive Wave of Light. This hard-hitting spender is among the skills benefiting the most from the 2.6.1 reworks, receiving damage multipliers from the revamped Sun Wukong set, Tokurin's Gaze, Pinto's Pride, Kyoshiro's Blade, and the buffed Incense Torch. The preferred rune is the Fire Explosive Light. While mathematically weaker than the other runes, it covers a wider area and translates into the most DPS per point of spirit spent. Even with the Incense Torch resource cost reduction, Wave of Light spam will still take a toll on your spirit reserves. A substantial part of your build and gearing choices will be focused on mitigating or recovering the spirit expenditure of the setup. While you can still run an Epiphany-based setup like in the video demonstration, there is a recommended generator skill in the build for high-end pushing in the face of Crippling Wave, coupled with the Protective Tsunami rune. This rune will reduce incoming damage by stunning enemies for a second in a generous 17-yard radius. It will also serve as a valuable proc for the generator half of the Focus and Restraint set bonus. Last but not least, it provides the solid basic 12 spirit per attack. Sweeping Wind is an integral part of the Sun Wukong setups, as it reduces damage taken while active and its stacks determines the damage increase of your spender. While crucial to have on your bar, the damage value of the particular rune is irrelevant. With utility in mind, take Inner Storm for the 8 spirit regeneration per second. With both a passive and active component, Mystic Ally will also aid your thirst for spirit through the Air Ally rune. Doubling the number of summons with the Crusader's boots, you increase the passive regeneration bonus to 8 per second and the active bonus to 200 per use. While the summons themselves will serve as a distraction at best, their spirit utility is invaluable. Uncommon among the protective skills because of its spender nature, Mantra of Salvation passively increases all resistances by 20% and adds 35% dodge chance through the Agility rune. Its active component further increases resistances for a brief duration, but should be used sparingly due to the already high resource costs of the build. To solidify the mobility options, monks have the most responsive and fluid movement tool in the game, Dashing Strike. A charge-based skill on a low cooldown, it will take you to cursor location without fail, as long as there is no closed door between your starting point and the destination. With 2 charges stored by default, you can skip unfavorable fights, seek out the next pack, or simply boost your survivability through the Blinding Speed rune. This concludes the overview of the active skills. Now let us look through the passives. Beacon of Meteor is a solid foundation for high skill uptime, providing a 20% chunk to your cooldown reduction. The sizable 30-second timer for Mystic Ally alone is important enough to demand a high cooldown reduction goal. A mainstay in the monk arsenal of passives, Harmony fuels your all resistance with 40% of the single elemental resistance per piece of gear. For example, 100 fire resistance roll on the boots will add 100 to your sheet fire resistance and add 40 to your other resists. A well-geared monk will usually sport secondary resistances in all the gear slots that are able to roll them, adding significantly to his overall toughness. Seize the Initiative is one of the best damage-oriented passives at the disposal of monks, providing you with a temporary attack speed increase when engaging enemies over 75% health, translating into faster Wave of Light output for the Sun Wukong monk. As you get more comfortable with the build, you'll learn to kite into and pull additional enemies or freshly spawned boss adds to effectively extend the benefits from Seize the Initiative. While pushing Great Rifts, take Near-Death Experience in your final slot, the Cheat Death passive available to monks. On the standard 60-second cooldown, it will prevent a lethal situation and restore you to 35% life and spirit instead. The 2-second immunity to damage and crowd control impairing effects is a nice bonus on top. If you're comfortable with losing this passive though, you can alternate the slot to the valuable dodge increase of the Guardian's Path. Let's go over the gear. The build includes 5 of the 6 available pieces of the Monkey's King Garb set, aka Sun Wukong, complete with the cubed Ring of Royal Grandeur to attain the full set bonuses. Rolls-wise, this Wave of Light-centric setup makes good use of resource cost reduction and skill damage bonuses. RCR is desired on the Sun Wukong shoulders, alongside high toughness stats. Double crit stats plus high dexterity and RCR are optimal on the Sun Wukong gloves. The Sun Wukong chest and Sun Wukong pants are pure toughness slots. The ideal role on the Sun Wukong amulet includes double crit stats and fire elemental damage, alongside the guaranteed socket. When it comes to jewelry, you should take into account the necessity to wear the Sun Wukong amulet, which denies you the opportunity for the Endless Walk set. With the revisions in patch 2.6.1, increased damage reduction from spirit guards, and the removal of stack consumption mechanics from the Sun Wukong set, you're heavily incentivized to transition the spec into a focus and restraint setup, greatly increasing your damage potential at the cost of minimizing the range and necessitating a generator attack. In place of the Sun Wukong helm, you'll be taking Tsokrin's Gaze, the spirit stone that turns Wave of Light into a ranged skill. With the 2.4 revision, it becomes mandatory for Wave of Light builds as it increases Wave of Light damage by up to 150% as a free 5th affix. Since the stack upkeep mechanics of the Kyoshiro Soul Belt are no longer necessary, you can safely fall back to the Witching Hour for its increased attack speed and critical hit damage as your belt. Pinto's Pride is a Wave of Light specific bracer that doubles as a damage amplifier and a tool for crowd control, slowing enemies by the impressive 80% when struck with a pillar. Helping you keep foes at bay, Pinto's Pride also gives you a vital, effortless proc for Bane of the Trapped. The Crusader's boots make a natural fit for the resource demands of the build, doubling your Mystic Ally summons and thus increasing the effectiveness of Air Ally to 8 spirit per second and 200 spirit per activation. Notice that Wave of Light is a possible skill damage roll on the boots, so strive to get it as a 4th primary stat alongside toughness stats and shift movement speed bonuses entirely to Paragon points. Kyoshiro's Blade is a crucial piece of a Wave of Light setup by bringing another 150% damage multiplier to the skill and spiking your damage even further when fighting 3 or fewer enemies, indispensable versus champions and Rift Guardians. Your other weapon will vary according to content. In Greater Rift progression, you'll do well to include Vengeful Wind in order to expand the burst potential coming from the Sunwuko set. In your legendary gems, Bane of the Trapped and Bane of the Stricken will be indispensable yet again. The former because of its separate damage multiplier, easily applied by the Slow of Pinto's Pride, and the latter to help you tear down Rift Guardians in high Greater Rift progression. Esoteric Alteration is the strongest mitigation gem available, and it will round out your gem selection choices. It's really helpful in the newfound face tanking position of the Wave of Light build, as it improves your elemental resistances with every gem level, and it also provides a last line of defense against one-shots because of its level 25 property. In Kanai's Cube, the weapon slot will be taken by Incense Torch of the Grand Temple, as its resource cost reduction bonuses soften the restrictive price of Wave of Light. Strengthened in patch 2.6.1, the extracted power of Spirit Guards is a big part of the reason Wave of Light builds are able to transition into fully offensive jewelry. At the cost of regularly attacking with a Spirit Generator, this legendary power will more than halve your incoming damage. In the jewelry slot, you'll use Ring of Royal Grandeur, a cash legendary ring from Act 1 bounties, running the full 6-piece Sunwuko set bonus and Tokrin's Gaze while dodging the undesirable guaranteed stats on the Grandeur by cubing its power is a tremendous boost to the build. In the Paragon Points core section, max out movement speed up to the 25% cap, then dump the rest into dexterity, investing into maximum spirit according to your personal preference. In the offense section, go for cooldown reduction first and then the 2 crit stats, finalizing things with attack speed. In defense, go for all resistance, then armor, then life percentage, and then life regeneration. And in utility, increase resource cost reduction first, then invest into area damage and finish it off with life on hit and gold find. After we've ridden the monk's Wave of Light, it's time to descend into the darkness of the Necromancer. Using the very bones of his fallen enemies to besiege the demons that still live in an unyielding barrage of bone, the Corpse Lance Necromancer makes a sharp transition into the Pestilence set in patch 2.6.1. Rotation-wise, the Pestilence Corpse Lance build spends the majority of a Greater Rift progression run scouting with Blood Rush, exploring the Rift layout and building up density before activating your major cooldowns. To protect yourself as well as buff up your damage, you'll debilitate the enemy packs you have rounded up with the Decrepify Curse. The massive Land of the Dead and Simulacrum cooldowns, which are to be used simultaneously, open a period of brief omnipotence on the battlefield, which you'll use to dominate any major fight. This is done simply by spamming Devour, which consumes a large amount of nearby corpses and sends out automatic corpse lances at all enemies via the Pestilence set 2-piece bonus. The solitary damage dealer of the build, Corpse Lance, launches a powerful homing missile at the expense of consuming a corpse, a precious resource generated from fallen enemies and limited passive means, which we'll discuss in a bit. You have 2 viable rune options to choose from, the single target oriented Brittle Touch, generally preferred for higher end content, and the consistent AoE of Ricochet. Regardless of your choice, you'll further amplify their damage with the dedicated Corpse Whisper Pauldron's legendary and the skill-agnostic Raylena's Shadowhook and Tragul's Corroded Fang. Similarly to the older Tragul spec, Blood Rush remains a strategically important scouting tool that you use extensively to uncover multiple elites before popping cooldowns, grabbing pylon powers, or simply skipping unfavorable layouts. With the Pestilence set, however, you're limited to a single rune, and considering the Devour-heavy nature of a Lance build, you'll do best to slot Molting for the extra corpse. While Corpse Lance will not cost you essence, you have to pay for it in fresh carcasses. Although they'll be generated from felling your foes, you'll generally avoid fighting individual enemies and rely on important corpse generating cooldowns instead. Land of the Dead is one of the Necromancer's longest cooldowns, and with good reason. While it's active, you can use corpse skills at will for a massive spike of damage. It is recommended that you use the Frozen Lands rune for its dependable crowd control despite the vague wording. Playstyle-wise, make sure to have a good pool of enemies and/or lured elites, as well as an active simulacrum to gain the most out of this massive cooldown. As mentioned above, you'll be incorporating a second-long cooldown, Simulacrum, solely to buff up your damage. While the clone copies your secondary skills, notice that none of them will be taken in the build. The skill is simply taken for the short-term doubling of your essence pool via the Reservoir rune. Do your best to synchronize the activation of Simulacrum and Land of the Dead, considering their matching downtimes and similar active length. 2 more of your slots will be taken by utility skills. The Mirror to Corpse Lance, Devour, will consume corpses for the Necromancer's Sustain, and due to the Pestilence 2-piece bonus, it will also fire your main damage dealer, making for an absurdly potent combo. Unlike the older Tragul spec, your lances do not cost you health, so you can focus on amassing a large health pool shield with the rune Satiated. Finalizing your utility picks, Decrepify will bring a sizable damage reduction wall to the build when coupled with the Dainty's Binding Belt. The rune Borrowed Time will add significant chunk of cooldown reduction to aid your Land of the Dead reset. Make sure to constantly refresh and maximize the number of cursed enemies on the battlefield. This concludes the overview of the active skills. Now let us look through the passives. Standalone is a staple passive of non- or low summoner builds. This Corpse Lance Necromancer variant will take full advantage of the lack of permanent minions at your side and enjoys the full 100% armor bonus. Draw Life is a powerful sustain tool, especially when coupled with a gemmed Molten Wildebeest's Gizzard and considering the monster grouping tendencies of lance builds, making it an indispensable tool for the survival of an otherwise frail Pestilence Lancer. Bloody's Power is the Necromancer's take on passives like Evocation and Beacon of Etar, along with the significant drawback of needing to lose your health reserve equivalent to trigger it. Since it counts off pre-mitigation values, however, this passive will trigger from the very flow of gameplay, which is constant high damage hits in any meaningful Greater Rift progression difficulty. With an overarching goal of reducing Land of the Dead and Simulacrum downtimes, Bloody's Power finds a deserving place in your passive selection. You have a degree of freedom in your final passive slot. Due to using Raylena's Shadowhook as means of scaling your damage, the default recommendation is Overwhelming Essence to expand your resource pool. Alternatively, Final Service is the Necromancer's approach to cheat death passives, a chance to evade a lethal outcome once every 60 seconds, along with a 10% healing proc per minion consumed in the process. For the gear, the build equips all 6 available pieces of the Pestilence Master's Shroud set, leaving the jewelry for powerful offensive combinations. Rolls-wise, this is a Corpse Lance and cooldown-centric build, making good use of both rolls across gear. Corpse Lance percentage damage is a possible roll on the chest and shoulders, and cooldown reduction on the shoulders and gloves. The remainder of your set armor slots, the helm, pants, and boots, can be dedicated entirely to toughness. Not skipping on any of the pieces required to obtain the 6-piece bonus of Pestilence opens a powerful offensive combo in the jewelry, the Endless Walk set, Compass Rose, and Traveler's Pledge. Their mechanic increases your damage by up to 100% if you remain stationary and drains it away and increases your damage reduction while moving. This dynamic mimics the Corpse Lance playstyle as you alternate between extended Blood Rush scouting and drawing enemy attention with short periods of stationary Corpse Lance spam. Seek double crit stats, CDR and an open socket for the Compass Rose, and double crit stats, cold percentage and an open socket on the Traveler's Pledge. In the highest tiers of Greater Rift pushing, over 100, your second ring slot will be best taken by the pure damage boost of Convention of Elements, whose rotation of elemental bonuses you'll need to learn and time to maximize the benefits of the short-lived cold proc. Up to the GR 100 point, you can safely revert to the lesser damage but convenient protection of Unity. Dainty's Binding is the solitary Necromancer-specific belt, which compensates its lack of flashy offensive powers with a mighty defensive bulwark, 50% extra damage reduction as long as there is an enemy afflicted by your curses. Note that it's very likely to lose the bonus during or in between fights as you kill off previously afflicted enemies, so make a point to reapply the curse on a regular basis. The build has no particular bracer to occupy the wrist slot, so you can default to the generic usefulness of Nemesis bracers. Their additional elite spawns will shorten the time necessary to end the Greater Rift and feed into the build's elite hunting strengths. The recommended weapon is Tragul's Corroded Fang, a powerful legendary scythe that triples your damage against cursed enemies, a bonus that is trivial to maintain with a few well-spread Decrepify casts in every battle. Due to the lack of directly synergistic legendaries, you should pair it with any well-rolled phylactery, such as Lost Time. Notice the importance of extra essence in the secondary stats of both the weapon and offhand in order to synergize with the powers of Raylena's Shadow Hook. The weapon and offhand setup will hit for less on average over wielding a two-hander, but will provide more of the vital cooldown reduction. In your legendary gems, Molten Wildebeest's Gizzard is a life regeneration powerhouse that almost single-handedly, of course in synergy with the Draw Life passive, takes care of the lacking sustain in the build. Note that this gem is a higher priority for the Convention of Elements high progression setup and can be easily replaced by a Bane of the Powerful in a Unity-based sub-GR100 run. Bane of the Trapped appears yet again, as its separate damage multiplier will be procced consistently with a combination of the Frozen Lance stun and the strong Decrepify slow. Zai's Stone of Vengeance is another independent multiplier whose range-dependent amplification can be easily maxed out by the long reach of Corpse Lance. The level 25 property will add some minor control, as well as another proc for Bane of the Trapped. The Kanai's Cube weapon slot should be taken by the two-handed scythe Raylena's Shadow Hook, whose power scales your damage multiplicatively based on your maximum essence. This places a strong emphasis on expanding your resource pool with Simulacrum Reservoir and Overwhelming Essence, maxing resource in the Paragons and attaining a high maximum essence in the weapon and offhand secondary stats. With the strong emphasis on Corpse Lance damage, it's only natural to include Corpse Whisper Pauldrons in the Armor Cube slot. These shoulders scale Corpse Lance damage per corpse consumed, a bonus you easily max out during Land of the Dead. Finally, the Jewelry Cube slot should be taken by Crispin's Sentence, whose effect doubles your damage against targets afflicted by slow and triples the bonus if you affect enemies with any other form of crowd control. This potent bonus will be reserved for your Land of the Dead Frozen Lands, but will affect every present enemy in the radius. Note that while you can theoretically equip the ring and cube the worn jewelry recommendations, it's preferable to store Crispin's Sentence in this slot due to its natural increased attack speed roll, because it deprives you of the ideal double crit, CDR and open socket rolls. When it comes to the Paragon Points core section, max out movement speed up to the 25% cap, then max out essence for Raylena's Shadow Hook, and then dump all the rest into intelligence. In the offense section, go for cooldown reduction first, then both crit stats and finally attack speed. In defense, armor, then life percentage, then all resistance and life regeneration. And in utility, max out area damage and life per hit first, then resource cost reduction and gold find. Now that we're done disturbing the dead with the Necromancer, it's time to stir up the voodoo with the Witch Doctor. For Season 12, Witch Doctors enjoy a massive boost to almost all of their major set playstyles. With that all-purpose numeric buff, it should be no surprise that the Firebats build is one of the highlights. When in need of a build that revels in hexes and fiery destruction, look no further. When it comes to rotation, keep in mind that the build can be executed both with the Arakir and Helltooth sets. In an Arakir build, Hex needs to be cast on cooldown, as it's a source of damage reduction from the Arakir 4-piece bonus, as well as a damage buff through the rune Jinx. With a Helltooth setup, the same purpose will be fulfilled by Wall of Death communing with spirits, reapplying the damage reduction from the Helltooth 4-piece as soon as it comes off of cooldown. Prior to channeling major damage, you'll need to apply Locust Swarm and Haunt in order to attain the immense damage benefits from a Ring of Emptiness. You'll also need to weave in a cast of Soul Harvest in order to attain the massive defensive and offensive bonuses. With that out of the way, you can begin the Firebats onslaught, stopping only to reposition with Spirit Walk. When using the Arakir set, Hex will be used on cooldown for its interaction with the Arakir 4-piece bonus for damage reduction and a free Toad of Hugeness rune, as well as minor damage buff from the slotted Jinx rune. The build dedicates 2 skill slots to trigger the crucial damage multiplication bonuses of Ring of Emptiness. One of them is Locust Swarm. During Greater Rift progression, you'll ideally be wearing the Vile Hive mojo and getting the Pestilence rune for free, allowing you to slot the Protective Cloud of Insects instead. The other Ring of Emptiness trigger skill, Haunt, is best taken with the mana restoring Draining Spirit rune. Firebats is among the creature skills buffed by the Arakir 6-piece bonus, and complemented by synergistic items like Coils of the First Spider, Bakuli Jungle Wraps, and Staff of Chiroptera, it becomes a Greater Rifting pushing worthy damage dealer. You'll be taking the hardest hitting of the runes, the fire-based Cloud of Bats. Spirit Walk is another Witch Doctor staple, and its moderate cooldown is compensated by its versatility. It renders you invulnerable, removes enemy collision, and increases your movement speed by 50%. The recommended rune is Severance, whose 100% additional movement speed will allow you to reposition in the blink of an eye. You can also viably alternate to the Honored Guest rune to add another source of emergency mana regeneration to the build. Finally, you'll be taking the Witch Doctor's staple Soul Harvest in all variations of the build, but for different reasons. In Greater Rifts, where the build wields a Sacred Harvester, you get an immense 30% intelligence buff from a reasonable 10 enemy harvest, as well as cut incoming damage in half and double your armor via the Languish rune and the Worn Lacumbus ornament bracers. This concludes the overview of the active skills. Now let us look through the passives. Conveniently matching the fighting radius of Firebats, the Confidence Ritual passive will reliably increase damage by 25%. Arachir Doctors take Creeping Death during Greater Rift progression to extend the benefits of their 2 dots, and more importantly, keep the valuable Cloud of Insects damage reduction and Draining Spirit mana regeneration going. Grave Injustice is a universally desired passive for the build, as it acts as a more universal Ingyam, reducing your vital defensive and mobility cooldowns without distinguishing between trash and elites. Spirit Vessel should be carefully considered for the final slot when pushing Greater Rifts as a soloing Witch Doctor, similarly to other cheat death passives for other classes. On top of the second life proc, it heals you for 50% of your maximum health and triggers a Spirit Walk-like effect, allowing you to escape danger. Before moving on to gearing, it's important to make a quick note about the Helltooth variation. If you prefer to play the build while using the Helltooth set, you'll only need to change one skill, and of course swap your equipped set to Helltooth. Hex will be replaced by Wall of Death communing with spirits, and will pretty much fulfill the same purposes, triggering the set-based damage reduction and boosting the damage of your mana spender with the Necrosis debuff. Let's dive deeper into gearing. The build incorporates either the complete Spirit of Arachir set or the complete Helltooth set. They're similarly successful when soloing. By taking all 6 available pieces of the respective set, you open up the jewelry for the Endless Walk set and its damage multiplication bonuses. Rolls-wise, the build takes good advantage of skill and area damage affixes, as well as cooldown reduction when speed farming. The best in slot roll for gloves includes high intelligence, double crit stats, and either area damage for Greater Rifts or CDR for speeds. Area damage is also helpful on the shoulders. It's recommended that you focus on toughness stats on the chest as well as the pants. The helm and boots can roll Firebats percentage bonus and is advisable to obtain it on both items. Wearing a complete set allows you to split between offense and defense in the jewelry slots. The Endless Walk set, Compass Rose, and Traveler's Pledge increase your damage by up to 100% if you remain stationary, and then increase your damage reduction as you move. This mirrors the Arachir playstyle, which goes from extended periods of Haunt and Locust Swarm spam into static Firebats channeling. The Ring of Emptiness will occupy your second ring slot. This legendary jewelry piece dramatically increases your damage against enemies affected by both Haunt and Locust Swarm, necessitating their inclusion in the build. Note that this slot is interchangeable with Unity depending on your better rolled item, with the weaker one going into the jewelry cube slot. 2 Firebats synergistic legendaries will be worn during Greater Rift progression. Lacumbus Ornament works alongside the bonuses of the equipped Sacred Harvester and adds 46% damage reduction to the build, 6% per stack, significantly improving the survival chances of this melee spellcaster build. Bakuli Jungle Wraps were added later, in patch 2.4.1, as a way to further boost Firebats damage on the condition that the enemy is affected by Locust Swarm or Piranhas, further cementing the inclusion of the former into the build. Sacred Harvester is the best in slot weapon for a Firebats Witch Doctor in Greater Rifts, as its unique bonus extends the number of Soul Harvest stacks from 5 to 10. With the opportunity to buff up to 30% intelligence, a true damage multiplier, and reduce incoming damage in half from a simple Soul Harvest, this ceremonial knife is very hard to pass up. To complement it, the best Greater Rifting offhand you can pick up for the build is the Vile Hive Mojo, adding the Pestilence rune for free to the build and thus easing the Locust Swarm spread onto the enemy. In your legendary gems, it will barely come as a surprise that we'll include Bane of the Trapped and Bane of the Stricken during Greater Rift progression. The former increases damage multiplicatively and procs itself in this melee range build, while the latter assists this AoE heavy spec to tear down solitary big targets like Rift Guardians. Pain Enhancer occupies the third and final jewelry socket during Greater Rift progression. Note that this gem is only necessarily leveled to level 25 to attain the secondary property, which is 3% attack speed increase per bleeding enemy in a 20-yard radius. This potent effect ramps up the Firebats damage with great efficiency and completely overshadows the bleeding effect, which is best left at a lower level to avoid lag issues. In lower Greater Rifts, you can easily swap this gem out for the well-rounded damage and toughness increase of Bane of the Powerful. In Kanai's Cube, tailored after the Firebat build, Staff of Chiroptera will be your weapon slot, sporting a unique affix that doubles the skill's attack speed and reduces its mana cost by up to 75%. The Armor Cube slot will be taken by Coils of the First Spider, providing much needed sustain and damage reduction in this near melee build. As previously mentioned, the Jewelry Cube slot will be interchangeable between the better rolled Ring of Emptiness or Unity. The latter is used, of course, to bring the 50% damage reduction when paired with another on the follower, who also equips an Immortality Relic. In the Paragon Points core section, max out movement speed up to the 25% cap, and then put all the other points into Intelligence. Invest into Vitality or maximum mana at your discretion. In offense, max out critical hit damage and critical hit chance first, and then move on to cooldown reduction and attack speed. In defense, go for armor, then life percentage, then all resistance, and finally life regeneration. And in utility, go for area damage and life per hit first, and then for resource cost reduction and gold find. After we've lit things up with the Firebat's Witch Doctor, it's time to move on and burn things to the ground with the Wizard. Last in line, but certainly not in strength, Wizards have two distinct paths to power that are fresh and exciting in Season 12. Meteor and Frozen Orb. After much deliberation though, I decided to spotlight the Meteor build. Its versatility is unmatched, and nothing comes quite close to raining fiery destruction on your helpless foes. As far as rotation and tactics are concerned, the Firebird Meteor Wizard strategy is to lure enemies, dragging them along to form the biggest fight possible. Notice that the 6-piece bonus will scale your damage and protection for each burning enemy, and will automatically max out if an elite enemy is burning, contributing to the elite hunting playstyle of the build. Once you scout out a sizable fight with teleport, begin channeling Arcane Torrent Flame Ward to trigger the meteors from Etched Sigil, and add your own manually cast meteors at 3-second intervals, which by the way is the duration of the Meteor Shower rune, to maximize your damage output. Needless to say, keep passive background buffs like Storm Armor, Magic Weapon, and Familiar active at all times. The primary damage dealer and namesake of the build, Meteor, summons a delayed aerial strike over a large surface, approximating the position of your cursor, lending itself perfectly to large AoE situations. You'll be taking the skill with the hardest hitting rune Meteor Shower, and you'll augment its damage even further with other skill choices and itemization. In order to circumvent the massive arcane power cost of spamming meteors, which is 40 AP per shot from about 100 AP pool maximum, which is simply unsustainable, you'll be equipping Etched Sigil and using its power to get free meteors by channeling Arcane Torrent. While the other listed channeled spenders on the item can also work, Arcane Torrent outshines them with speed, versatility, and adaptability, plus a great fire rune to boot, which is necessary for the Firebird set bonus. The Flame Ward rune will add valuable protective angle to a skill you'll be channeling for most of the run. To finish off the trio of necessary fire skills to max out the Firebird set bonus, you'll be using Familiar for its minor DPS proc and decent additive damage increase of the Sparkflint rune. The remainder of your skills will be dedicated to protection and utility, leading off with the Wizard's trusty mobility and repositioning tool Teleport. You'll add an angle of survivability to the skill during your progression attempts with the rune Safe Passage. Due to the high variance of incoming damage in this mid-range playstyle, a source of passive defense and minor damage amplification should be added in the form of Magic Weapon Deflection. This long-lasting steroid remains quietly in the background and procs consistently off of your spellcasting barrage, bringing a nice damage buffer on top of your health and mitigation. Last but not least, you'll be adding Storm Armor in the build. With a fire and forget duration of 10 minutes and a negligible damage proc, it can be easily overlooked, if not for the potent flat resource cost reduction of the power of the Storm rune and the massive damage reduction properties of the cubed halo of Carini. This concludes the overview of the active skills. Now let us look through the passives. Two protective picks provide the foundation of the passive choices. Blur is a straightforward addition to the Glassy Firebird build, reducing incoming damage by a flat 17%. On the other hand, Unwavering Will provides a conditional layer of protection, including valuable armor to counterbalance the abundant resistance of wizards, as long as you briefly stand still. This is easily fulfilled in a channeling build. Illusionist is a passive with a lot of depth and nuance. It serves the build specifically by resetting the teleport cooldown when receiving a damage spike in high greater rifts, and working with a pre-mitigation calculation, it gives you near infinite mobility. The additional 30% movement speed after teleporting makes the passive even more attractive. Finally, Audacity gets a chance to shine in this dominantly melee range build by bringing an impressive 30% multiplicative damage increase against enemies within 15 yards. Let's go over the gear. The build incorporates the complete Firebird's Finery 6-piece bonus, taking 6 of the 7 available pieces and opening up the jewelry for the Endless Walk set and its damage multiplication. The build can roll the vast majority of said armor slots completely into toughness, dedicating the chest and pants entirely to the task, and splitting it in half with resource cost reduction on the shoulders and crit stats on the gloves. Meteor damage increase is possible on both the helm and the boots, and you should seek it out on both. Note that stacking armor benefits you because of the balancing of sources of mitigation, as all resistance is already abundant on an intelligence-based character. Notice also the absence of crowd control immunity in the spec, because this is a non-Archon build, making crowd control reduction secondary stats, ideally on the helm but also can roll on jewelry, very beneficial. Taking enough pieces to obtain the 6-piece bonus of the Firebird set naturally opens a powerful offensive combo in the jewelry, the Endless Walk set, Compass Rose, and Traveler's Pledge. Their mechanic, which is stacking damage bonus while stationary and balancing against a damage reduction bonus while moving, matches the Meteor Wizard playstyle, alternating long-distance movement to favorable monster density with periods of stationary Arcane Torrent channeling. Your second ring slot should be taken by convention of elements. The ring rotates through all the elements available to wizards, providing a massive bonus to your main damage skill during the fire proc. The best in slot belt for the build is the Witching Hour. What this belt lacks in unique properties, it makes up in unique rolls. It's the only item in the slot that can roll attack speed and critical damage. You'll counterbalance your belt's glassy nature by including a purely defensive bracer, Ashnagar's Blood Bracers, which will double the potency of your active and temporary shields. The remaining item slots, weapon and offhand, will be occupied by dedicated channeling legendary items that enable the playstyle interactions in the first place and increase the build's damage output. Etched Sigil is a build-defining legendary source that augments and casts equipped spenders for free, and you purposefully limit yourself to Meteor in this case. Death Wish is a pure damage increase, affecting your overall damage, including the Etched Sigil casts, while channeling Arcane Torrent. In your legendary gems, Bane of the Trapped and its multiplicative damage increase makes its usual appearance. You'll benefit from it naturally as Meteor wizards tend to fight in melee range to maximize the Firebird dot uptime. Bane of the Trapped procs itself with its level 25 property. Taeguk is a rare hybrid of defense and offense among the legendary gem options, and continued Arcane Torrent channeling will ensure that your stacks remain capped for a constant, well-rounded benefit. Bane of the Powerful provides a 20% multiplicative damage increase after killing an elite pack, as well as a baseline 15% damage increase against and damage reduction from elite enemies. The bonus duration upgrades at a steady pace with gem levels, and is usually a good indication of your power. If it falls off, you're past the limits of your current setup. Nevertheless, in the highest tiers of Greater Rift progression, you'll have to swap this slot out for the stacking damage increase of Bane of the Stricken. In Kanai's Cube, your weapon and armor slots will be taken by Meteor dedicated legendary powers. First, you have the Grand Vizier augmenting the Meteor's damage and cutting its resource cost in half. And second, you have Nilfur's Boast strengthening Meteors even further and empowering their capabilities in small-scale combat, which is very useful against Rift Guardians. The Jewelry Cube slot is best taken by the massive damage reduction bonus of Halo of Carini, with its trivial requirement of using Storm Armor in the build. In the Paragon Points core section, max out movement speed up to the 25% cap and put all the other points in intelligence, only touching it into maximum arcane power and vitality according to your personal preference. In the offense section, max out crit damage and crit chance first, then dip into cooldown reduction and attack speed. In defense, go for armor, life percentage and all resistance, and finally max out life regeneration. And in utility, go for life per hit and resource cost reduction first, then finalize it with area damage and gold find. And this is it for our build compendium for Season 12. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed the guide, subscribe to the channel if you enjoy my content, talk to me on Twitch and the social media link below, and I'll see you very soon with more builds.